Hello, this is Rojin Mukriyan from the Amargi. I'm honored to be joined by Professor Abbas Vali to discuss the recent wave of protest in Iran. Professor Vali is a political and social theorist specializing in modern political thought and Middle Eastern politics. He is the author of many books, including The Forgotten Years of Kurdish Nationalism in Iran. Professor Vali, welcome to the Amargi.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here and taking part in this discussion. Thank you
so much. Thank you. 11 days have passed since the protests began in Tehran's Bazaar after the Iranian currency fell to its lowest level against the US dollar. Many shopkeepers say constant currency fluctuation made the bazaar unstable and unprofitable. But the protests soon spread to other parts of Iran, especially to the western regions where protesters chanted anti-government slogans. At first, the government tried to calm the situation. Officials said they recognized the people's discontent and that the citizens had the right to protest. But as the protests grew in size and intensity, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei changed his tone. In a recent speech, he stressed the Bazaar's loyalty to the Islamic Republic and warned that, quote, rioters must be put in their place, unquote. So far, more than 20 people have lost their lives, including 5 under the age of 18, and over 1,500 have been arrested. Most of the casualties belong to minority communities, including the Kurds and Rus in Western Iran. Professor Vali, let's begin with this. How do you evaluate this new wave of protest in Iran?
Thank you. I think if we believe that history is the continuity of discontinuities, then this particular episode in the development of popular protest in Iran is in a way continuation of a previous one in 2002, which came to be known as the Uprising of Woman Life Freedom, Jinjian Azadi. This is a continuation of it, but this is not, if you like, the same as the Jinjian Azadi one. There is what I would say, change in form, both in the field of discourse and also political, sociological, structure of this movement. So this continuity here tells us that there has been a break. There has been a break, and after that break, we are in a new phase in the development of popular protest in Iran. This break clearly is very important in order to understand the discursive, political, and sociological specificity of the present phase of the movement. This break, from my point of view, came about when the movement was suppressed, but the political and social forces on the ground and the opposition, which in one way or another tried to claim the movement or leadership of the movement, they sat back and did nothing in terms of developing the democratic content of a movement which had been suppressed. So that movement was suppressed, and it is major specific features, which one was to bring about, and it did bring about, a intersectional democratic identity, which I call it Jina identity, under which we had forces which fought against 3 forms of apartheid, that is the gender and sexuality apartheid, and national, ethnic, linguistic apartheid, religious, cultural apartheid also. All of it articulated against a background of aggressive, completely unregulated, new liberal capitalist economy in which the particular form of exploitation was a rent and rental situation, because the industry had basically largely collapsed, and it was working, according to the statistics, in about 33, at most 37% of its capacity. So in this situation, political rent, and it is economic, if you like, rewards, were major form of exploitation. I would call it the major form of plunder, really, in Iran. It was, that articulation of the intersectional democratic identity targeting these three forms of, apartheid always passed through this network, clientelist networks of capitalist, exploitation, mainly in the form of rent, and then, of course, values, surplus value, and so on and so forth. But when the opposition failed to develop and deepen the democratic content of this movement, the movement basically fell not only quiet, but also began losing its initial energy. So that is what happens. Women's movements were separated from it. They lost their, if you like, ability to connect. The youth and the young generation sat back, and also the political activists, which were partly in prison and partly had been forced to quietism, they sat back. As a result of this, this happened. The second important thing was that the regime had targeted what is called the peripheral communities, Kurdistan being one of them. And peripheral communities were main targets of repression and the suppression of this movement. And that also, once happened, the interrelationship between the center, which has not been so badly hit, and the peripheral communities, which were the main targets of repression, that interrelationship was weakened and eventually, I would say, was cut off. And this movement, of course, this was an achievement, but which having a participation both of the regime and a sector of the Iranian opposition, the right-wing opposition, led by or represented and led by the monarchist opposition. They, in the course of the Jina uprising, they realized that they do not have the force to dominate and lead the uprising, nor they actually, wanted its democratic content. So whether it was a written or unwritten alliance with the regime, they helped the regime to suppress the movement, particularly because they wanted to movement to fail, because they couldn't control, because couldn't lead, and so on. And above all, they were completely fearful of its growing democratic content. And this gave, a kind of provided a, what I would say, both an objective and subjective condition for the alliance of the regime and democratic and anti-democratic opposition in Iran. But this objective base and subjective base, unfortunately, is still there, and it is likely that it could be activated in a particular conditions, which I will talk about. Sorry, coming back to the specificity of this movement. So it's a break, it's a continuity, but discontinuity. Discursively, this, I would say, it's a step back. because those democratic slogans in the beginning of the previous movement, but slogans with very clear democratic content, clear if you like, dimensional, if you like, multidimensional social and political content. That, in a sense, what we see, at least insofar as the discursive expression of this movement is concerned, I would say that doesn't exist now. What we have now is death to the dictator. We don't want, first of all, largely the movement now, the target of movement has been personalized. It is even not a personalized, but it is focused on the regime as represented by the leadership of the regime, the ruling household, or at most the power bloc. Therefore, it has completely left aside the anti-democratic, repressive institutional structure of this regime, which was very much targeted in the previous movement. That is one thing. A second important factor that I see sociologically, we do not see that the peripheral communities, so-called, they are reluctant to take part, both because of what they experience suddenly, the way that they see that the regime, the movement in the central Persian hinterland, which is basically Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, Mashhad, that these slogans are more or less are absent, and the movement shows a very one-dimensional, if you like, feature, one-dimensional, if you like, character, and that there is no slogan which will be responding to the multi, if you like, faceted character of Iranian society. There is nothing about radical democratic pluralism. There is nothing about identification of the repression with a regime and system of apartheid that is used by its regime to continue its domination in Iran. So this is one of the important things. And sociologically, I think the middle class now, at least what I see in peripheral communities, has sat back and in a sense doesn't have that participation which is to be expected. And even in the Persian hinterland, this movement is still very sporadic and very one-dimensional. I do not see a large participation of the Persian middle classes, despite the fact that they should be in the forefront of this opposition, because they are very badly hit by the, if you like, the evil of, if you like, high inflation and taxation. We remember that in this new budget, the budget is trying to secure, if you like, the economic running of administration of the country, mainly on the basis of taxation rather than oil revenue. The taxes from 40% apparently has jumped to about 64%. And the burden of this taxation is on the middle class.
Okay, Professor, you mentioned many points that brought many questions also to my mind. I want to ask, first, you mentioned both continuity and discontinuity with regards to the women life freedom movement. And what I received from your description, that you believe that women life freedom, especially the suppression of women life freedom, created the condition for co-option or appropriation of the movement, which create the condition for some sort of alliance between what you somewhere else refer to as oligarchs of the state or oligarchs within the circle of the state and monarchy circle. First of all, I would like to ask you, who are these people that you refer to them as oligarchs inside the Iranian regime? And second, what kind of alliances do you think that they can form with Pahlavi circle? Because we know, while we know that Pahlavi has not explicitly said that I want monarchy for the future of Iran, but the inner circle of Pahlavi openly they call for monarchy for the future of Iran. So do these oligarchs within the Iranian regime also favor monarchy, secular monarchy that opens the door of Iranian economy for the neoliberal system, or do they want something like a dictatorship that just basically to form a military dictatorship that we previously witnessed in many revolutions? So first, what do you think about this? And then we go and talk about middle class that you mentioned also.
Yes. You see, this regime in two phases. One was in the time of the presidency of Hashemi Rafsanjani. Basically, the security military apparatuses were allowed to come into the, if you like, economic and financial processes of the country under the pretext of rebuilding the country after the Iran-Iraq war. And this was, if you like, a reason for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Basij and other security and military apparatuses of the regime to get involved in very big way in the financial and economic administration of the country. And it was the beginning of the beginning of development of a large scale rental economy structured around patron-client relationship from top to the bottom. And this developed further because of the American and international sanctions on Iran, which created a huge black market and also forced the regime to go and look for, if you like, alternatives to legal ways and legal economic and financial ways to operate and work and connect with the international market, international financial economy, and so on and so forth. So combination of the ways of bypassing the sanctions and their financial economic effects and their active legal instruments in the international area, and also the fact that security and military apparatuses became major, if you like, organs of rebuilding Iran after the Iran-Iraq war. That means that a huge economic oligarchy in Iran came about, and this oligarchy was based on, if you like, a small circle of security, military, political, if you like, persons and institutions, mostly running the parallel governmental organization under the auspices of the ruler's household. They control the economy. At present now, we are facing a situation that this economic and financial oligarchy is in fact the foremost power controlling the country, so much so that even the so-called leader and his household, insofar as it could act as an autonomous organization and decide the fate of the foreign policy and internal policy in Iran, they are largely, sort of dominated by this oligarchy, and that this oligarchy, in fact, is the foremost force which is operating in Iran. And this oligarchy is open to change, but not democratic change. And because it is very much determined to keep its economic interest, its financial interest in the eventuality of the collapse of the regime, it is ready to form alliances if you like, situation develops in a way that the collapse of the regime will become fundamentally unavoidable. I think this oligarchy is ready, in order to save its own economic interests, form an active alliance with the anti-democratic sectors of the Iranian opposition, namely the royalist, if you like, royalist opposition. And the royalist opposition, obviously, it is possible to be forced toward this alliance when it thinks and sees and experiences the rapid development and rapid sort of development of the democratic aspects of the regime and the rise of democratic forces in this uprising. That will be, the sign for the right-wing opposition to retreat and try to save the day by forming an alliance with that financial economic oligarchy in the regime, which also has, as it is, supports sectors of the military and the security apparatus with it. So could be quite powerful. And it is quite possible that, because what I'm saying, both objective economic conditions are ready for that, and also subject in terms of political conditions, both of them share one major ground, and that is anti-democratism. That is anti-democratic aspects of the regime. This is a clear danger. This may come about if this movement is deepened democratically, spread democratically, and democratic forces from inside the country come to form organizations to control this regime. The monarchist forces will be in retreat, and the oligarchy dominating the regime at present in the power bloc, they will be, if you like, smelling the collapse, the imminent collapse of the regime, and such a thing may happen. If we should remember that in the entourage, and in fact, I would say that sort of the support basis, political support basis of the monarchy, there are people quite prominent, and these people have a history of activity in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They have direct relationship with them, and also Reza Pahlavi has, in numerous occasions said that would want to keep the security forces as they are. In other words, the problem with this movement is that the opposition is divided in terms of its objectives, in terms of its discursive representation, in terms of its social and political base. And we shall talk about this more, I think.
Okay. Again, one more question on Pahlavi first, because based on what we see, yes, there are some little social base that they're chanting about Pahlavi and monarchy. We also see that some of videos being co-opted or manipulated, and they like use artificial intelligence to change their slogans. What I want to say that it seems that Pahlavi doesn't have that much social base inside Iran. Considering this and considering also what happened in Venezuela, which they captured Maduro, but didn't. The Trump administration didn't favor the opposition figure living in exile, which was like Miriam Machuda, and favor someone from and within the system, within the government. And it seems that Trump administration prioritized stability over democracy. That was always part of the US strategy, but we see it more now clearly that they prefer, or what capitalism or what neoliberalism prefers, is stability for the market. And considering all these factors, that might lead to the argument that Pahlavi doesn't have much chance in the future of Iran because doesn't have a big, large social base. Most or majority of the minorities, which constitutes almost half of the Iranian population, doesn't favor Pahlavi. So Pahlavi's return might bring instability. And this is not something the Western power might want it. So doesn't this tell us that Pahlavi might not have a big chance in the future of Iran? Or do you think that there is still possibility of alliances between Pahlavi and within these oligarchs within the Iranian regime? If Pahlavi doesn't have much social base, and we have a strong oligarchs already that they have control even the physical force of the state, why do they need Pahlavi? I don't know, how do you think about this? Yeah.
It is true that so far we can, say by what we see on the ground and by what we see in, if you like, the political field in general. Pahlavi doesn't have that social support. The social support doesn't have that cohesion, and and numerically is not, a very vast, large base. But Pahlavi's, if you like, problem, being this, we should look at the other side of the opposition. The other side of the opposition maybe that they are stronger socially and numerically. They have a wider base of support, but they're tactically very weak. They are very weak. And so far, they have shown that they are unable to act in a united and uniform way. And also, they are unable to take control of the movement. The movement now is going ahead, and I'm sure as it develops and goes further, it will be, more developed democratically. The slogans might change. But the problem here is that we have a so-called democratic opposition, which is widely divided, and both in terms of their objectives and in terms of their alternative for Iran. And they have so far shown that they do not have that ability to tactically take hold of the regime, this movement, and guide it towards their own objective. One here, what supports this argument is this, that people are all saying that death to the dictator. This is, they're all saying that down with the Islamic regime, but there is no talk, not even, slighted reference to what alternative might come, might take the place of the Islamic regime. What do they want? This really shows that the democratic opposition, be they, be they the forces which are inside Iran, and forces which are outside Iran are widely divided, very broadly divided, and that they are unable to show a uniform democratic, to form a uniform democratic front and have a uniform democratic discourse, and a strategy to guide this movement. Therefore, this gives an open hand to the Pahlavi and the right wingers inside Iran to continue their destructive strategy of, on the one hand, pushing their own goal and their own cause, on the other hand, to undermine the democratic opposition. There is no, the women are not prominent in this movement, in the leadership and guiding of movement in different towns, despite the fact that, for instance, in the, if you like, the border areas between Iraq, between Kurdistan and Luristan, and the part of Kurdish around Elam and so on, we see that the struggle is is very violent. We see that the confrontation with the regime is is very obvious and very see, and is intensified by the hour. But on the other hand, we see an absence of a democratic alternative being chanted and wanted. So this really reflects on the condition of the democratic opposition. I think and here you talked about outside interference. I think from my point of view, there is not a uniformity and, if you like, union of objectives and policies between the United States of America and Israel in this direction. What Israel wants is either collapse of this regime or the economic and financial destruction of Iran. There is little doubt that if the regime in Iran collapses, if the democratic opposition has collapses, if the regime collapses before the democratic opposition taking hold and forming a transitional government and calming the society, a transitional government or transitional, if you like, administration, which is, if you like, a pluralist, which is democratic, which takes into account various and diverse identities and interests and sectors of Iranian population. That's what I mean. If there is no such a thing, I think in the heat of the moment, I wouldn't be surprised if Israel makes a massive air attack on Iran to destroy the economic and the economic and military security structures of Iranian, society. When the regime collapses, you can never say the Iranian regime at that time. Say Iranian society. I mean, that would be a bad thing for both the peripheral communities, because if peripheral communities, political forces, for instance, in Kurdistan, they're going to inherit a community, a society, which is financially destroyed, which is its infrastructures bombed, and so on. This is going to make their task of administration in Iran very difficult, even in their own side. So what I would say that America doesn't want that. America wants either a peaceful transition, relatively peaceful transition to a new power structure. But this power structure, from American point of view, ideally will not be involved huge institutional change, which in effect would be the democratization of those. I don't think Trump and I think Trump and his administration wouldn't care less about democratic or aspects of this change. What they want is a stable Iran. What they want is Iran, which has, if you like, subjugated to America, accepted America's demands. Four major demands that America has had in negotiation. So I think Israel probably would, that's one thing. And in that respect, also I come to this thing that there is a lot of talk about, the relationship between America and the royalist or generally right-wing administration. So far, I can see no signs that the United States of America has made a choice about who would serve their interest if there is a change in Iran. Certainly, they haven't made up their mind about monarchy and monarchist administration, and I do not think that American administration is particularly interested in the return of the monarchy, and Israel as well. I think Israel would rational, if makes a rational choice in this respect, would see that if the monarchist, opposition doesn't have that social support, doesn't have that, it is not just social support, it is basically unable to think strategically, you see.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
the fact that Israel also may change its position on Iran on the, in the final hour is also a likelihood.
Yes, you mentioned both the possibility of Israel to take the second massive round of airstrikes against Iran, and we saw, I think it was the Times of Israel reported yesterday that saying that Netanyahu sent a message to Putin to tell Khamenei that Israel doesn't have any intention to conduct a second round of airstrikes against Iran, which Khamenei said this is a lie and we don't believe it. However, there are some reports also indicating that the Iranian state or the Iranian regime also preparing to conduct a preemptive strikes against Israel, and this kind of scenario was become more evident when yesterday again the Defense Council of Iran published a statement which highlights this point that they might engage in a preemptive strike against Israel. And the rationale behind this scenario for the Iranian regime is that they have the capacity right now and they should use it because they are kind of ensure that the second set of strikes from Israel against Iran is imminent. So they think that they shouldn't lose their capacity to attack, and they want to basically what many people say to use whatever they have right now before they lose it. First, do you think that such a scenario is plausible? And then after that, if you keep it short, that will be great, because I want to ask 2-3 more questions, especially from the minority perspective, and then from Trump and the possibility of a change in Iran. Thank you.
I think Israel is not honest about it, and I mean, one shouldn't expect honesty and submission to moral and ethical standards in politics. But so is not honest about it and would act when and if its interests are, sort of required. If it would act. But what is important here is that Israel is a state which from the 15th of May 1948, when it has been established to this day, there has been a huge development, what may be called the siege mentality, you see, in Israel. Israel always have felt that it's under siege, under the siege of the Arab states, the hostile world. Now Iran is prominent in this siege, and so on and so forth. Even Europe, I mean, doesn't even trust Europe, really. The only probably sectors of American administration, the ultra-right, sort of American administration that Israel may trust. But this is the situation. So Israel, in this state of siege that governs the mentality of the Israeli politicians, they are fundamentally paranoid. They are very paranoid about outside attack, about what to lose what they have, about the collapse of the state of Israel. On the other hand, on the Iranian side, at this condition, one should never really disregard this paranoia on the part of this regime to do anything, absolutely anything, to save the day. You see, and also paranoia about the real intentions of Israel, about real intentions of America, real intentions of Europe, or real intentions of anybody who comes with an advice, like sort of the Gulf states and so on, to be intermediaries between Iran. So we are looking here, looking at two blocks facing each other, both feel that they have been, under siege, and both feel very paranoid about it. So one could expect anything. I wouldn't really say that this scenario, although it is very far-fetched at the moment, but I wouldn't disregard this, to say that Iran, in order to save the day, might start sort of making missile attacks on Israel. And because the idea is that if you want to turn tables in Iran, is to start a military, to instigate a military attack on Iran, which would basically, very likely to kill this, demonstration, this uprising, and also unite the sectors of Iranian society under the banner of Iranian nationalism, and also the very large section of Iranian society which is considered as the gray zone, or the gray, so on. They will be mobilized at least to protect the country from foreign invasion for the time being. But this is really a very far-fetched scenario. But like any far-fetched scenario, if the conditions are required, may become part of the political calculations of Iranian government. But the Iranian government now knows that it is in a very weak state, knows that it is not able to respond and satisfy the demonstrators, and the movement is being radicalized and intensified by the hour, particularly if repression continues like this. Therefore, I think they are more concerned about containing this situation. For them, containing the situation also means reducing the threat of a foreign attack on Iran.
You mentioned that Iran is in one of the most weakest state of its existence. We know that Iran simultaneously suffers from multiple poly crises really now. Lost all its like his foreign policy kind of failed, lost the most of its deterrent power. It's like so-called axis of resistance, severely damaged, weakened. We know also the Iranian nuclear power capacity or nuclear program also severely damaged, lost much of its air defense system, its like missile program weakened. That's from just foreign policies, and the maximum pressure from the US, the activation of the SNAP mechanism, but domestically also suffers from other multifaceted crises and problems, including like shortage of water, all these environmental like disasters that we see in the Middle East and North Africa, particularly in Iran. Like the regime cannot even produce enough electricity and gas for domestic consumption. Inflation is based on even the Iranian state data is about 40%. The expectation is go to 50%. this year in food is 70%, it is in bread 100%. And even now, to refer to what Khamenei himself says, that the Bazaar are one of the most loyal group to the existence of the Islamic Republic. But we see even these Bazari people revolt and uprising. So can we say that the Iranian regime is in serious, real trouble? And you don't think that combining all these poly-crises actually make a change unavoidable in Iran, a political change, whether that comes from external like pressure from Trump or airstrike or internally? Can Iran survive even without external intervention the way that it is, considering all these crises simultaneously?
It's very difficult to say. If you ask me now, I would say the possibility of the collapse of the regime now is more than any time in the last 47 years, right? But then one cannot see, the unforeseen, this is it. But regime really, by any means and standards of political analysis and the calculation, regime must go. But this is, if you like, on the basis of rational thinking. But we cannot, see, foresee the future. This is one thing. What is important is that if this regime has, in terms of, economic administration of the country, it has disintegrated. The economy of Iran has disintegrated. I mean, if you look at Bazaar was the basis of regime support. And this featured in Khamenei's comment that said he is very surprised because Bazaar has been always behind the regime. But why Bazaar is not behind the regime? You see, the political forces in Bazaar were mainly hay'at-hay mu'talife. That means that the allied association of top merchants and small merchants around, an Islamic program represented by the Khomeini before the revolution and after the revolution by the Islamic regime. But that top echelons of that allied associations are part of that business financial oligarchy, business financial military security oligarchy that I mentioned. They have the control of the sanction-based black economy, black finances. They have the control of import and export. And that means that Bazaar is, as an economic force, the social structure of this economic force has come apart. Part of it is part of it is joined, in fact, is central, that oligarchy. Another part, which is very much suffering, this monopoly control of the economy by the oligarch, by the business military security oligarch, they are now in a bad shape. And they are the small part of it, small, if you like, the traditional petty bourgeoisie of Bazaar is very unhappy. They are the force behind these demonstrations in Bazaar. But part of the Bazaar has already joined that business oligarchy, which has been ruling Iran and is likely, if alliance with the right-wing forces in the opposition happens, they may continue ruling. But that is the case, basically it. But as far as the situation is concerned, I think the regime also is not only that economic disintegration, but there is a disintegration of the hegemony in Iran. Hegemony has disintegrated, and the cracks in the power block are appearing. But the danger is that the democratic opposition from below, which can decide the fate of these cracks in the power block, that is not strong enough now. And this is a very dangerous situation. It is opening up the possibility for the intervention of anti-democratic forces. So the disintegration of the hegemony of the regime, the disintegration, the ideological inefficacy of an ideology of the regime now has no organizing, no, if you like, legitimizing, function in that respect. This is gone. And in this situation, we see that the power block is now really, cracks are opening. You see there are several, there are Paidaris, the resistance fronts, who are the most extremist in terms of Islamic ideology of the regime. There are sort of Pezeshkian middle ground, Jalil, Zarif, and others. And then there is, if you like, the so-called reformists, which are partly in the margins of the regime, partly outside it. So this unity of the power bloc doesn't exist, but the cracks are not wide open because the democratic pressure from below is not strong enough to bring it about. And this, as far as if this power bloc continues like that, the collapse of the security and the repressive apparatus of the regime will be delayed. And the security apparatuses of regime will collapse, will, if you like, come apart, will be divided if, in the face of the collapsing, the disintegrated hegemony of the regime, when they feel that the leadership, the power bloc, the divisions are so big that cannot hold the pressure from below, and also democratic pressure from the below is so strong that not only making repression ineffective, but also challenging it successfully.
Yeah, I think the level of this danger facing the democratic forces even become more evident and bold when we consider the geopolitical shift globally. Unfortunately, change in Iran became kind of unavoidable at the time of this geopolitical shift that goes more into the direction of fascism and less like democratic, and that also has an impact on the future development in this protest, I think. And you but mentioned a few times that there is yes, some democratic forces, but they are not unified and not strong. And now 11 days passed since this protest started. Many are cautious, especially minorities, especially Kurdish people, and they're kind of watching and pursuing the development of they're watching this protest with an extra political cautious. We see that in Kermanshah and Ilam, two Kurdish majority provinces in west of Iran, that they joined this protest since the early days of the beginning of the protest, and even 10 of the casualties belongs to this province so far. And following these developments, we see that 7 of the Rojhalat or Iranian Kurdistan Kurdish political parties, in a joint statement, they call for general strike for Thursday, 8th of January. First, I would like to ask you, how do you see this joint statement by these Kurdish political parties? Of course, this is not the first time they jointly call for such a general strike. But do you think that, first of all, that can trigger some sort of democratic uprising from the bottom, not just in Rojhalat, not just in Kurdish populated area, beyond that, because the call is directly to the Kurdish people, to Rojhalati society, which already is a organized, vibrant civil society. We saw women life freedom in 2022, and that is, I think, an evidence for what I argued here. But do you think that call for general strike has this potential to maybe trigger a democratic uprising and change the direction and the trajectory of these protests, or no?
I think the situation in Kurdistan is very very sensitive in this respect. I think Kurdish political parties, largely it seems, they are lacking the confidence, you see, to come up with a very clear-cut position about this uprising. You see, it is very important. But if they come up, and for instance, the meeting of the 7 parties 2 days ago, and this statement is good, but this statement is not enough. What is important? The people must see the effect of this statement on their own conduct, and that is this: that they should unite institutionally in this respect and discursively. They have to come and unite. Unite, I mean, they have to form a coalition. I don't mean integration, right? This coalition should be such that to end one particular very important suspicion about these political parties. And this suspicion is that whether they are really after their own singular party interests, or they are thinking about the interest of their nation or people that they claim to represent, right? If they really want to, if they claim to represent this, then they have to come and make a coalition, form a coalition on the basis of a non-ideological, I repeat it, non-ideological minimum program. The objective of it would be to unite the people in Kurdistan. That is, I mean Kurdistan, Kurdish speak, I mean including what is called Western Azerbaijan and so on and so forth. Kurdistan in general, to unite those people around this project and this minimum program, non-ideological, non-party, but what may be called national program. The objective of it is first to try to form a wide base opposition, democratic opposition in Kurdistan against the regime. That's one. And then try to bring in democratic forces from other peripheral communities into this alliance. And then try, on the basis of this minimum program and united front that they are showing in practice to the people in Kurdistan and Iran, they should approach for alliances with other democratic forces in Iran, particularly those who are inside Iran. You see, now when this front is formed, then they can claim the leadership of the movement in Kurdistan. In Kurdistan now, there is opposition, but insofar as parties are concerned, and insofar as I know, in different towns, the followers of different political parties are acting differently. That is a huge strategic mistake at the moment. What is necessary is this united front, which is not only in in words, but in practice. There is a coalition around this minimum non-ideological, non-party ground. And if that coalition also at the same time has a military side to it, that is a united military, if you like, center or of the Kurdish political forces. Because the idea is this: they should have this, long-term vision, this sight, this vision, that what happens if the regime collapses? What happens in the regime collapses, and if the Kurds do not have a united front, if the Kurds do not have a united military force, if the Kurds have not already tried to create united civil society organizations inside Iran, if the Kurds have failed to mobilize women and the youth and take into account their autonomy of action and discourse in the present situation, and if the Kurds do not have one single, structure of decision making, and above all, one single discourse, one which would generate a democratic, slogans, democratic discourses to keep this alliance going. This is the important thing, is that this regime, not just only in Kurdistan, this situation just not in Kurdistan, but also in general in Iran, the strategic question of the day is to develop and deepen this movement democratically, quantitatively, and qualitatively. And I think Kurdistan is very well placed by these seven forces, which, by the relationship these forces have with their own followers and inside, to form such a front and save the day in Kurdistan. That is very important.
Thank you so much, Professor Abbas Vali. We'll leave it here. Thank you so much again for your valuable insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.